All right, welcome to this deep dive, crafted just for you. We're tackling something I know a lot of you struggle with, understanding native speakers. It's like sometimes, even if we're learning the same language, native speakers are speaking something totally different. So whether you've got that big meeting coming up or just love learning new skills, this deep dive is all about boosting that listening comprehension, giving you those tools, those aha moments. We're diving into this article, How to Understand Native Speakers, Tips for Better Listening Skills. And, it doesn't sugarcoat things. Native speakers can be tough to follow right.
You got that right, even for someone like me who's been studying language for, well, quite a while.
So let's break it down. What makes native speakers so hard to keep up with?
Well, the speed, for one, they can talk really fast, but it's not just the pace, it's how the words kind of morph together. Like, what do you want to do?
Mm.
Turns into, what do I want to do?
Oh, connected speech.
Exactly. And that can be really confusing if you're not used to it.
Yeah. I was in London once trying to order a coffee, and the barista hits me with a, what do you want to do?
Ugh.
I totally froze. Felt like a verbal avalanche had just hit me.
Perfect example. And that's just one piece. Then there's idiomatic language.
Ah, idioms. Those quirky sayings, always tripping me up, like break a leg. Not literally wishing you harm, but good luck. It's like they're speaking in code.
Exactly. And then, of course, the regional accents, British, Australian, American, Southern, you name it.
Yeah.
So many variations.
It's like English is playing a game of accents with us. So where do we even begin with all this? This article mentions immersion, but we hear that advice everywhere. What's different here?
Well, it's more than just passively watching movies. It's about finding immersion that truly interests you.
Yep.
Like if you're into tech, find online forums where people discuss gadgets. Love cooking, watch cooking shows.
Find immersion that's meaningful.
Exactly. By tapping into your interests, you're going to stick with it. But even with immersion, sometimes it's still gibberish.
Right. So what then?
Think about it. Have you ever been in a foreign country and understood a conversation even if you didn't know all the words? Maybe someone giving directions. You might not get every word, but you get the gist from their gestures, the setting, the overall situation.
Oh yeah, I've had those aha moments where it all clicks, even if I'm missing some syllables.
That's your brain working, filling in the blanks. So zoom out, consider the big picture. What's the topic, the setting, any nonverbal cues? All those help make sense of what you're hearing.
Okay, that's a good point. But sometimes even with context, it's tough. You're trying to focus, but the words just fly past you. What about those times?
That's where active listening comes in. It's more than just paying attention, it's actively engaging.
Like being a detective.
Exactly. And one clue that's often missed is tone of voice. How someone says something can reveal more than the words themselves. Are they excited, hesitant, sarcastic? Tone adds a whole new layer.
Think about that's great. Can be sincere, sarcastic, even passive-aggressive, depending on the tone.
Exactly. So you're not just decoding words, you're tuning into their emotions, their intentions, like reading between the lines.
Wow, that is fascinating. Honestly, though, I'm sometimes so focused on catching the individual words, I miss all that. Any tips for paying more attention to tone?
One exercise. Listen to audio recordings and try to identify the emotion behind the words. Start simple, like a movie scene, then move to more challenging stuff.
So build a tone detector muscle.
Exactly. And it's so valuable with native speakers, where the tone can be really subtle.
Okay, so we've got immersion, contextual listening, active listening, but let's go back to speed. The article talks about connected speech, those blended words that even trip up experienced learners.
Right, and there are two key things there, elision and assimilation.
Those sound a bit technical. Break it down for me.
Sure. Elision, think of comfortable. Native speakers often say comfortable. They drop that or sound, I am going to, becomes I'm gonna.
So the language is streamlining itself, getting rid of the extras?
Exactly. Now, assimilation, that's when sounds change because of what's next to them. Like, can't you becomes can't you?
Can't you, can't you? Okay. So elision is dropping, assimilation is blending.
Precisely. And once you recognize those patterns, rapid speech gets easier to decode.
That's helpful. But how do we train our ears to pick up on these changes?
One technique is shadowing.
Shadowing, I've heard of that, but how does it work?
You listen to a native speaker recording and imitate them as closely as possible. Pronunciation, rhythm, everything.
Like you're their vocal shadow. Sounds a little awkward, no?
It can feel strange, but it's great for pronunciation, intonation, fluency. It's all connected.
I'm willing to try, but I worry sometimes that it's just mimicking, not really understanding. How do I make sure I'm not just parroting sounds?
Good point. Start with a short clip, a sentence or two, and really listen to each word's pronunciation. Then start shadowing, speaking along. But here's the key. As you're shadowing, think about the meaning. Don't just focus on the sounds. Think about the message being conveyed.
Connect the sounds to the meaning.
Exactly. And as you get comfortable, you can use longer clips. Even try shadowing live conversations.
Wow, that's taking it up a notch. But I can see how that would be super helpful.
Absolutely. Powerful tool for any level. And it's especially good for understanding that connected speech.
Okay, so shadowing for connected speech. But even when we understand the words, sometimes they make no sense together. That's where idioms come in, right? Those expressions that can really throw you for a loop.
Absolutely. They're like a secret language within a language, adding flavor but making things confusing.
Totally. I remember hearing kick the bucket, thought it was about sports. Turns out it means to die.
Classic example. The article stresses learning these because they're everywhere in real conversation. Sometimes I wonder, though, are they worth the effort? There are so many idioms, and they often seem random.
Yeah, it could feel like a whole new language on top of the one you're learning. But here's the thing, they're like shortcuts to fluency. When you get an idiom, you're not just understanding the words, you're understanding the culture behind them.
That's a great point. Idioms give you a peek into the values, the humor of a culture. And using them correctly makes your language sound much more natural.
It's like you're showing you get it. You get the nuances of how it's really used. So how do we tackle this idiom jungle?
Start with the most common ones. You can find lists online or in dictionaries. And try creating your own examples using the idioms. Makes them stick better.
So instead of just memorizing bite the bullet, I could say, I had to bite the bullet and give that presentation even though I was terrified.
Exactly. Putting them into practice makes them yours, part of your active vocabulary.
All right, so idioms are like the spice. What about those regional dialects, accents that make English sound like a whole other language?
Accents, yeah, that's a whole other level. The article is spot on about familiarizing yourself with different accents.
But there are so many. Where do we even start?
Start with the ones you'll likely encounter. Trip to Australia, focus on that. Work with UK colleagues. British English it is. Movies, TV shows, podcasts are great for this.
It's like giving your ears a world tour. What about when you're in a conversation, though, and can't understand a word because of the accent? What then?
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Most native speakers are happy to repeat or rephrase. Much better to ask than to pretend and miss something important.
True, but honestly, sometimes it feels embarrassing to ask, especially at work. Like I'm not competent.
I get that feeling. But remember, everyone asks for clarification sometimes, even native speakers. It's normal communication. And by asking, you're showing you're truly interested in what they're saying.
Good point. Okay, so speed, idioms, accents, what else is there?
One that's often overlooked, and it might surprise you, improving your own pronunciation.
Hold on, how does that help me understand others better?
Think about it, the better you pronounce sounds, the easier you recognize them when others say them. Like your brain has a clearer picture to match.
Fine-tuning your internal sound system.
Exactly. The article suggests things like the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA chart.
I remember that from textbooks. Looked like a secret code.
It seems intimidating, but it's actually super useful. Each symbol is a specific sound, no matter the spelling. Helps you break down words and practice them correctly.
Learning the building blocks of pronunciation.
Exactly. And another great technique, record yourself speaking and compare it to a native speaker.
Oh, I've done that. Humbling, but helpful.
Definitely. Tons of online resources for this. It's like having a pronunciation coach in your pocket.
But sometimes it feels like there's just so much to learn with pronunciation. Where do you even begin?
Start with the sounds that are toughest for you. The giving you trouble. Focus on the words. And don't be afraid to exaggerate at first. Trains those mouth muscles.
Like pronunciation reps.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing thing. Constantly refining, aiming for clarity and accuracy.
Makes sense, like any skill. Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Immersion, contextual listening, active listening, idioms, accents, now pronunciation. Clearly, it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is, developing a whole toolkit to help you navigate spoken language.
But it can feel overwhelming. How do you keep all those balls in the air?
That's where the article makes a great point. It's about building listening stamina.
Listening stamina, what does that mean?
Like any muscle, you got to work it out. The more you practice, the stronger your listening gets. But don't overdo it at first.
Like you wouldn't start marathon training by running 26 miles on day one, right?
Exactly. Start small, short clips or conversations, then gradually increase the length and difficulty.
So realistic goals and gradually up the challenge.
Exactly. But what about when you hit that wall, feel like you're not making progress?
Happens to all of us, I'm sure.
Totally normal. Language learning has plateaus, it has setbacks. It's a journey, not a sprint. Staying motivated is key. Keep pushing yourself.
It's like climbing a mountain. Tough moments, but the view from the top is worth it.
And luckily, we're in the digital age. Tons of resources for this journey. The article specifically calls out using technology to your advantage.
Technology can be a game changer. So many apps, websites, podcasts for immersive learning.
One of the simplest things, adjust the playback speed. Listening to a podcast, speakers too fast. Slow it down till you can follow comfortably.
Oh, I do that all the time with podcasts. Lets me focus on each word.
Exactly. And as you improve, gradually increase the speed until you're at their natural pace.
Training wheels for your ears.
Exactly. Plus, there are apps with interactive listening exercises, getting feedback right away.
Like a personal tutor on demand. But what about the social side? The article also talks about conversation groups.
Absolutely. Technology is great, but nothing beats real-world practice. Groups give you that safe space to practice with other learners.
It's go time, putting those skills to the test. Though I'll admit I get nervous joining those. What if I mess up, say something silly?
Totally understandable. But everyone there is learning. Mistakes are part of it. In fact, they're valuable.
Like they say, you learn more from failure than success.
Exactly. And by pushing yourself, engaging in real conversations, you're not just improving language, you're building confidence and connections.
So it's about more than just the words.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked practical strategies, but the article also mentions mindset. What does that mean for language learning? It means approaching it positively and resiliently. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the small wins, don't fear mistakes.
It's a journey with bumps along the way. Keep your eyes on the prize and believe you can get there.
Exactly. Focus on progress, not shortcomings, and celebrate every victory.
So reframe our perspective. Don't dwell on mistakes, but acknowledge the effort we're putting in.
Precisely. And be patient with yourself. Learning a language takes time and dedication.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. But it can feel like you're running in place even when you're trying hard. What advice for someone feeling discouraged?
Well, first, acknowledge those feelings. It's natural to feel discouraged, especially when it's tough. But instead of letting it stop you, see it as a chance to grow.
Turning negative thoughts into fuel.
Exactly. And break your goals down. Instead of fluent overnight, maybe focus on one skill or learning a few new words each day.
Achievable goals, celebrating those small wins.
Precisely. And make it enjoyable. If you're not having fun, you won't stick with it. So explore different methods, find what clicks for you, and don't be afraid to experiment.
It's about finding your own way.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. The challenges of understanding native speakers, from speed and connected speech to idioms and accents, and tons of strategies to improve, from immersion and active listening to pronunciation and building that stamina.
Yeah, and it's not just about the techniques themselves. It's about that overall approach, that curiosity, that resilience, being okay with the messiness of learning.
The journey, not a destination, right?
Exactly. And this article really drives that home, that understanding native speakers isn't some magical thing, it's a skill. And like any skill, it takes work and the right attitude.
I got to celebrate those small victories, right? Those aha moments where something that used to sound like total gibberish suddenly makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the best. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's shift gears for a sec. We've talked a lot about the how to improve, but what about the why? Why is it so important to be able to understand native speakers in the first place?
That's a good question. It's more than just like ordering a coffee on vacation, right?
Way more. It's about unlocking this whole new level of communication, of really understanding people. Think about the richness of human interaction, the humor, the emotions, all those subtle things we convey through language.
And when you can understand native speakers, you're not just understanding the words, you're getting all those cultural and social insights too.
Right, it's like getting access to a secret club. You're in on the jokes. You understand those little things that would have gone right over your head before.
Yeah, I love that analogy. So it opens up all these doors, right?
Right.
For travel, relationships, even your career.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with people on a much deeper level, and that can lead to some amazing things. I think that's a really powerful message for our listener.
Definitely. But before we go, what's one piece of advice, just one, that you'd give our listener to take away from all this?
Pick one thing we talked about today. Shadowing, idioms, slowing down playback speed, anything. And commit to using it this week. Just one small step can make a huge difference.
That's perfect. Actionable advice. It's not just about knowing, It's about doing.
Exactly. And remember, language learning is a journey, so enjoy the ride, celebrate those wins, and never stop exploring.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and happy learning.
Yeah, and it's not just about those techniques, it's the approach, the curiosity, the resilience, accepting that it's going to be messy sometimes.
Totally agree. The article really emphasizes that understanding native speakers, it's not magic. It's a skill, like any other.
And we got to celebrate those small wins along the way, those times you suddenly understand something that was gibberish before. Makes it all worth it.
Absolutely, those are the best moments. So let's shift gears a bit as we wrap up this deep dive. We've talked a lot about how to improve listening, but what about the why?
Why? Yeah, why is it so important to be able to understand native speakers? Why should we care?
It's a good question. I mean, it goes deeper than just getting by on vacation, right?
Way deeper. It's like you're unlocking this whole other level of understanding, of really connecting with people. Think about how much we convey through language, humor, emotions, all those subtle things.
And when you can understand native speakers, you're not just getting the words, you're getting the cultural references, the jokes, the whole package.
You're in the club.
I like that. You're in the club.
Yeah.
It opens up so much: travel, relationships, even work.
No doubt. You're connecting with people in a much richer way, and that's powerful. Powerful message for our listeners, I think.
For sure. Before we go, any last words of wisdom? One piece of advice for our listeners.
Pick one thing we talked about today. Shadowing, idioms, whatever resonated. And commit to using it this week. Even a small step can make a difference.
Make it actionable, right? Not just knowing, but doing.
Exactly. And remember, language learning's a journey. Enjoy it, celebrate your progress, and never stop exploring.
Beautifully said. All right, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and as always, happy learning.